Hey guys, welcome to Sip and Rip It. I'm Zach. He's Nathan. You can find me at ZG_ Summer Shred Journey.
Yeah.
And you can find him at Nathan Skedios. And you can find us both at Sip It and Rip It. Get on Spotify, Apple, whatever you listen on. Rate us 5 stars. Share the podcast. Do us a favor because we need help.
I didn't even have to say anything this time. I was just sitting back, just drinking my drink.
I tried to take care of all of it. I tried to be on it, mate.
Making up for missing last week.
Yeah, trying to make up for it, man. Trying to make up for it. I forget, getting right in the meat and the potatoes of this thing, do we do PR songs first or we normally do gym first?
I think we normally do gym first. I think it's just kind of like, that's how we always started it. We never really had a format. We kind of just winged it until we
We're still just winging it, baby.
We are still.
For all 10 of you that listen. I got a feeling after today's episode, we'll dwindle down to about 5.
We might lose a few, but that's okay because it is an interesting topic that we want to talk about and is something that is important in the powerlifting community.
Especially the future of women's powerlifting.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's definitely something needs to change in regards to what's going on, but.
Absolutely.
Before we get into that, gym stuff. What did we do in the gym this week?
Week before last, I spent 2 days bedridden with a QL strain, a pretty bad one. Started physical therapy this week on my hip for both my IT band and my torn labrum. I'll be having more imaging done on the labrum to see to what extent I tore it, or if I tore it more on the meet day. And then, kind of a gentle week, mostly because I was coming off that QL strain, which isn't a big deal, but boy, they're painful. They suck real bad.
Anything having to do with your lower back just kind of can completely cripple you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you use it for everything, so it basically stays cramped.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it was rough. And then, honestly, I had a very, very minor strain going into a chiropractic adjustment. And then after my chiropractic adjustment, it just was like set on fire. Mm-hmm. So I really probably did myself a disservice by getting adjusted with a back strain.
Yeah.
Because I think it set me back, quite a bit. But it is what it is. Other than that, I was able to build on everything this week. Ended up having a decent bench day. I think I accumulated about 70 reps. Anywhere from 135 up to about 275. Was going to get under 315 for a few reps. On Thursday, but had one of my employees happen to be in there while I was lifting. He was like, you should take 225 for as many reps as you can, see what you can do. And by that time, I was already like 40 or 50 reps in, so I only hit it for about 15. But ended up working for up to 275 for about 4, pretty easy. But I was definitely fatigued because that's the most volume I've done since meet day, really, since prep. So just didn't have the tricep left to go any heavier. And then my leg day, let me just say here on this Easter Sunday that I crucified it. Crushed my leg day, man. Absolutely crucified it. And we're trying to resurrect these gains now. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. That's going to lose us the 5.
That's what I say. There goes 2 of you at least, and then the other 2 to 3 will fall off shortly.
The strong Christians that listen to our podcast.
I don't know if there is. I don't know how many of you there are, but let me say this: even when I was a practicing Christian, I wasn't above making a joke about it at all. It's still funny to me. Right. Sorry. So
in regards to that, I'll just say if you can't make fun of it, then you take it too seriously.
Yeah, it probably ain't doing that much good for you in a positive way. If you can't
laugh about a joke, then there's something wrong. That's just my personal opinion, but that goes to a lot of things that I believe. So
Yeah. So
that was your week.
That was my week, baby. What about yours?
Oh man, my week was so boring. It was deload week. And the only thing that felt even remotely challenging was, I think, my squats. And that was because I was still trying to fix the butt wink problem that we've been addressing. We made a whole podcast about, I fixed my butt wink. And I was like, just kidding. It's still there.
It's very minimal, though.
It is very minimal. The groin stretch has helped tremendously, but it is still there a little bit. And we've kind of went back to what you said about the hip shift, which we are working on with.
You may end up in a lift like me. We don't know yet.
I ordered one. We're gonna try it out and see if it helps. I'll probably wear it for a couple days.
You need to wear it for a couple days prior to your squat session so that your QLs adjust to the new balance in your hips. Yeah. Otherwise, you're gonna set yourself up for a strain.
Yeah. It I think it's supposed to be here on Tuesday, and I squat on Thursday, so I'll wear it on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday up until I squat, and then we'll see.
Yeah, I think you'll be okay.
Any adjustments have been made, and if not, then it's fine. It was $8 that I threw away for
it's pretty
an attempt at a fix. So. But yeah, nothing major over here. Just some easy peasy breezy. Feeling pretty cheesy.
Yeah, I hear you. It's amazing. I guess I'm so deconditioned from both prep and the fact that I've been hurt. I've been able to get a pretty massive leg pump with just 4 or 5 exercises in a day.
Yeah.
So I've been doing some squat variation, hack squat, and then leg extensions, and then some hamstring work, and I've been out. So,
yeah.
Probably need to add some calf work in because I have tiny calves. But
everybody has.
It is what it is. But I've been able to do a leg workout in about an hour, which is rare for me. But also the load is
right.
I mean, I worked up to 50% yesterday. That was my heaviest load for a set of 2 was 50%. So, I mean,
yeah,
pretty long way off from my potential for sure. You know what I mean? So,
speaking of the gym, I do want to recite a little story here.
Okay.
And I've talked to you about it prior. But so I have this issue with people who kind of like get all up in your space for no reason. So I was at the gym and I was doing lunges over by for everyone at Hartzell Fitness that knows, there's the floor mats, and then there's the water machine, and I was doing lunges across it. And there's a leg press over here and a barbell.
Squat rack.
Squat rack, yeah.
So you're basically in the aisle between the squat rack and the water
yeah.
button.
So I'm just doing lunges, minding my own business. Everything's cool. And this guy comes in, he sets his bag down over by the squat rack that I'm talking about. No big deal. You're going to use the squat racks on it, whatever. I go, and there's some barbells in front of that mirror that's next to the water machine, water fountain. So I'm doing some upright rows because I don't want to take up a squat rack doing upright rows because that's just that's bad etiquette.
Yeah.
Someone else can do it for literally anything else. So I'm just doing my upright rows, no big deal. He's a little bit in my vicinity at this point, so he's got a band wrapped around the squat rack. And he's all the way past the leg press machine and like in that general area. I'm like, it's fine, whatever. I'm just going to do my upright rows. And, we got enough space in between us that nobody's going to be bothered.
Yeah.
I go and put some weight. I was doing it with just the bar. I threw some 10s on there, something light, just whatever. And I kind of pace a little bit because that's what I do when I'm waiting on my timer to go off. While I'm pacing, I walk back and this dude is like right in front of my barbell. And I've got like a minute left on my timer. And I'm like, I don't know how long this dude's going to take to stretch, but he's literally right in front of my barbell. And he wasn't before. So I just walk in and I'm like, hey, dude, you're like right in front of my barbell. He looks up at me and he says, well, I'm stretching. So, and I'm like,
well, I'm working.
Well, I didn't say that. I said well, you were stretching over there. So can you stretch over there? And he's like, I'm almost done. So can you just wait? And I was like, whatever, whatever. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Then he says, and I was here first anyway. And I was like, you weren't here first. You were over there first of all. I was over here doing lunges before you even got here. So I was in this space already. He pulls back his band. He walks back. He gets real puffy and says, I don't fucking care. Don't talk to me anymore. And I was just like, I was fuming. Like, I was like, just not gonna, I was doing my best not to fight this person. Like, I was so mad. I was visibly red. And I could see, because I could see myself in the mirror when I started my upright rows. And I would tell you, I have never, like, it's not heavy. It's 65 pounds, but I was throwing those through the roof. I was so mad. I was just like, you got to calm down. This isn't worth going to jail over. But, like, this dude, and then, like, he walks halfway across the gym at that point, doing something completely different than what he was doing. Which, just to go ahead and say it, he was stretching on the pull-down bar. So he had weight on the pull-down bar, and he was just stretching his back. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You're just being in people's way to be in people's way. Now, I got to go do shoulder press at this time, so I go over there, and I'm doing shoulder press, and he's like, you know, behind me a little bit, because you know where the upright, or the pull-down bar is over there, the cable pull-down machine, and I'm like over here, and I just kind of look up just to see if he's even staring. He won't even look at me at this point. I think he was probably pretty scared. I haven't seen him at the gym since.
What a pussy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of gives off that vibe of like he thinks he's tough, but if you like go at him, he's.
I would like to know who he is, to be honest.
I was told his name, but I don't care enough to remember his name.
That's fair.
But just to sum up the story, practice good gym etiquette.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. Like,
it's not hard to just like not be in people's way.
Yeah, and I will say too, there's an obvious difference in etiquette for us powerlifters and there's like bodybuilders, but like, you know, if somebody's in there and they're obviously a bodybuilder, like, you probably don't want to walk in front of their mirror mid-set, like,
or if they're posing, you know, just kind of give them their space.
Walk behind them, like stuff like that.
It's not hard. It's literally not that hard.
That's also a relatively big gym square footage wise, like, and there's also a designated stretching area in another room that you could very easily go.
I will give him this. He was stretching with a band attached to the squat rack, so he did need a fixed point, and there's not any fixed points
back there. Yeah.
Back there, so I can understand his mindset of being out there to stretch, but he didn't have to take up the whole walkway between the leg press and the squat rack, as well as get into my area with the barbells. Like, he took up that much space. That's how he was stretched from that point in the room to that point in the room. That's how far his band was stretched.
Yeah, you just need a stronger band, bud.
Yeah, or double loop it,
or go somewhere else. You can find a new. I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, people have bad gym etiquette, man. Like, you know, like just like you said, like, you know, we have four squat racks there. We have 3 against the wall and then one in the caddy corner. Yep. Yeah, so we're not at a shortage of squat racks, but like just like you talked about, like doing upright rows on the floor instead of in a squat rack. Like, that's good gym etiquette. Like, you know, you probably shouldn't be doing, you know, single leg presses on a assisted pull up machine if. There's only 2 assisted pull-up machines and people are waiting on it. Like, you know, shit like that. Like, it's kind of obvious fucking shit. You know what I mean?
Tricep
like,
press downs on it. Yeah, I've seen some shit.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I like single arm press downs on that thing. And
I mean, I've been guilty of
them. But yeah, especially, you know, at a busier time in the gym, and our gym is kind of busy around noon.
Yeah. Also at 3 to. You know, 2, 3, and 4. It does get a little busy.
It does. It is busy in the morning when I'm there. It is what it is. But like, you know, if you're in there with a full gym, you need to be using machines for what they're made for, because people are waiting on them, and they don't want their time wasted, and you don't want to waste anybody's time because it's rude. And you also should never invade somebody else's space.
Yeah,
it just is.
That's probably the biggest thing.
You have to have some awareness. I mean. It's the same reason why we try not to use, you know, 3 or 4 machines at a time. I'm cool with a superset. If you want a superset leg curls and leg extensions, those machines are beside each other. People will pick up pretty quickly what you're doing on them. It's fine. Also, I mean, people are bad about not letting people work in. So let somebody, you know, if you need a piece of equipment that somebody else needs and you're already on it, don't make them wait. Just let them work in with you. It's just simple.
You have a rest period anyway, right?
Yeah, like you're just work alternately. You know what I mean? It's fine.
And if you don't have a rest period for some reason, you probably aren't going to be on the machines that long anyway. So the person is probably going to be completely fine with waiting. If you're going to do 3 sets back to back to back, you're probably going to tire out pretty quick. First of all, so you're probably not going to be on there very long.
Yeah, exactly. It just is what it is. People have piss poor gym etiquette. People have piss poor etiquette in general.
Yeah.
And that guy pays the same membership me and you do, so we're entitled to our own space the same way he's entitled to his space. Yeah. And I hope that I have a run-in with him
That'd be funny. I'd laugh. I'd like to see it.
I mean, I will do it with I'll absolutely roast that guy with a smile on my face and enjoy it the whole while.
I mean, like I said, haven't seen him since. This has been like a week and a half ago, and he would always show up when I was there.
Is it the white dude that's kind of dark complected with a ponytail? He got a bad, like...
He didn't have a ponytail.
Short ponytail? Oh,
No.
man, I was hoping it was him because that guy's a prick, too. Damn.
Older guy?
Is he older?
I'm asking you. Like,
No, this guy's probably a little younger than me. He's probably about your age.
I probably haven't seen him then.
Yeah.
I was thinking about
He wears some Nike Air Maxes, like some obviously not gym shoes, and like tries to do the Viking braid, but he can't really do it. And he's like
nice. Gotta love it.
Got that high and tight with like long hair on top, and like tries to pull it back, whatever. It's kind of funny. It is what it is. We got some characters at that fucking gym, dude.
It's true. It's true. We do have some cool people though.
There's quite a few.
There are a handful that I've personally talked to that I really enjoy.
Kevin's
cool.
Shane Vest. I don't know if you know him. He's an older dude, pretty buff. Most of the older men in there that I've ran into are pretty cool guys.
Some of them are. Some of them.
Eric Fields, the cop, the rock look-alike. He's a cool
Fields
guy.
Seems cool. Yeah, I haven't talked to him, but
there's there's plenty of good people in that gym, but there are some absolute fucktards in there too. There really are, and they do get pretty competitive and heated, and like
it's really funny.
I had 2 teenagers in there yesterday, just fucking acting a fool, just big chested. Fucking acting like they own the place and shit too.
Pressing
better than everybody.
135.
Yeah, they have 185 on the bar. Hitting for like sets of 3 to 5. Like
they own the gym.
It's like, bud, I don't even think we don't even load that up for a warm up anymore.
Right? We kind of pass over that to 2.
Yeah. Right? I mean,
it's like, what's the point of 185?
I don't understand, but I guess egos are going to come with the gym. I mean, I've got one, but I've never been like malicious toward people, so I don't really understand what everybody else do. I think when you're strong, you just don't give a fuck no more. Like, you don't really care to dick measure like that.
Well, it gets to a point, right, where you're like, I know how strong I am. Either you don't matter, you're as good as me, and I kind of do want to compete against you, but not necessarily a malicious way. And then there's someone who's better than you're like, well, shit, I need to learn from this dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you get to a certain level, that's kind of how you look at things, I feel like.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. I mean, everybody's in there on whatever grind they think they're on, and trying to better themselves, and it just is what it is. The male ego is a very funny and fragile thing, and I don't start anything like that, but I definitely will finish it if they want. If they want a dick measure, I'll whip mine out and show them if they need to. Like, it's fine, but
I will say this, and it's another thing I told you, just for the sake of the podcast. It's really funny when dudes kind of like try and compare against you when you're on deload. They're like, I can do that too. Yeah, I can throw 4 plates on and like squat it for like 2. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm like deloading for sets of 4. But like, it's whatever, dude. Like, meet me when I'm back in here on my program, like on my week.
It is what it is, and then they probably are nowhere to be found when you do something.
Oh,
cool.
For sure. They don't want to see that.
They don't want to see it. Yeah,
That's
like
funny.
I said, too damaging to their ego. By the way, we were drinking just Malibu and fruit juice, so nothing special on the cocktail tonight. We got mine.
A little bit left.
Mine is cashed.
Mine's gone. I'm almost done. This is the second one. They're too good.
We got
too easy to drink.
PR songs today, baby.
We do. I'll pull mine up.
Mine's all going to come 3 different bands, all from the same EP. They got the Aggression Session split that has Fit for an Autopsy, The Art is Murder, and Malevolence on it. And we're just going to go the first 3 songs on it. Hellions by Fit for an Autopsy is fucking awesome. Waste of Myself by Malevolence is also fucking awesome. And then my favorite of the 3 is The Art is Murder. And they have a new song called Until There Is No Longer, and it fucking rips too. And their second song on that EP is a cover of Hammer Smash Face.
Hell
and
yeah.
it's fucking awesome. So,
I'm going to have to listen to that. What EP is that?
The Aggression Sessions EP. So if you remember, The Art is Murder did the Depression Sessions with the Acacia Strain as an EP that they put out. And then this is the sequel to it, but it's with Malevolence and Fit for an Autopsy. So
Hell yeah. That sounds pretty dope.
Good.
I'm going to have to check it out. For me, I'll go, since you brought 3, I'll bring 3. We'll go with Resurgence by Within the Ruins. They may have been on here before. I think probably Gods Amongst Men.
I think so.
Because that's one of my favorites by them. Again, just deathcore, cool shit. I really like it. Into Nothing by Bleed From Within. They're a little lighter, a little more metalcore than deathcore, but they kind of remind me of like early All That Remains in a way.
Cool.
Which I really dig, early All That Remains. And we'll go with Hymn of Annihilation by Aversion's Crown, who has also been on here before.
Yeah.
They're just badass, dude.
They are badass. It's a good band.
Anything else?
Good band. Solid.
Yep. And that covers our usuals.
Yep.
Now we got to talk about some real interesting shit. We'll put it like that.
Yeah. So what we're talking about today is a slippery slope. Me and Nathan have our own individual opinions on it, our own feelings on it. I'm going to try to leave mine out of it and look at it from a practical standpoint. But basically what we're talking about is transgendered people in powerlifting, specifically trans women who were formerly men who are now competing in powerlifting. And there are examples of this in other sports that, we can point to. And it's very important to me that I don't sound like a bigot because I do support the rights of these people. But there is a degree to where now your rights, if your rights begin where someone else's end and vice versa, I do feel like now we're getting to the point that we are stepping on women's rights for the sake of a much, 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 much more smaller and negligible minority. Mm-hmm. Not that those people aren't important, not that they don't deserve rights, but we are basically flipping women's rights on it, women's sports on its head for the sake of inclusion. So much so that I feel like it's exclusion by inclusion in a way.
Right, because there's just there's just a big difference in someone who is born male and someone who is born female, right? Yeah. There's just always going to be that difference. No matter how many drugs, surgeries, there's always going to be just a genetic difference there. And I just want to say again, I agree with you on everything that you've just said. Like, rights are deserved. This isn't about taking away anybody's rights, but it's about the fact of fairness.
It may be about preserving rights.
Yeah.
So basically, the hot topic in powerlifting, though, is we had a Canadian male who previously identified as male. Choose to identify as a female, didn't change anything about himself, just identified as female, went and absolutely demolished a trans woman's female records. And mm-hmm. I say that loosely because I'm not sure that she should be in there. And by her own admission, she seems like there could be some unfairness about her competing. But anyway, she basically came out and called this guy a bigot and said that it was out of, had malicious intent, which I actually kind of agree with. I mean, he did it to prove a point.
I don't think it was malicious. I think it was to say, this is the problem with what you're doing, right? Yeah, this absolutely. Is the problem with the standard that we're setting, that I can just come in here, I'd say I'm a female and break this record because I came in and said it, right? Because that's how they're approaching it.
By the way, on meet day, he doesn't bother to shave his beard, nothing. He just goes and competes in the women's category. Yeah. And by the way, annihilates every previous record that could be held. I mean, and by a lot, because this is not somebody that's undergoing hormone therapy or anything like that. He basically comes in off the street as a man, says he's a woman, and then goes and proceeds to crush Canadian women's records.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this is just Canadian powerlifting. This isn't a world record. This isn't anything like that.
Yeah, it just pertains to Canadian sports. So, but anyway, I'm sure this guy did it to prove a point, and that's that. It is to some extent a slippery slope, and I think it brings up some pretty important things, and that's if we're going to allow people to transition and then compete as their opposite biological sex. How do we do it ethically? Because I'm not sure either one of them being there is ethical, really. Mm-hmm. But certainly she, being the actual transgendered athlete, competing is more ethical than him competing, mm-hmm. because she has undergone the surgery. She has undergone hormone therapy. She is not biologically, but chemically closer to being a woman than he is.
Right.
So, I mean, potential solutions to that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just going to point this out. And I'm reading this from New York Post, just in case anyone.
Which is, it should be disclaimed that you can read it from other places too. But New York Post is a right-leaning news organization. So if you want to look it up somewhere else, by all means do so.
But I just want to say, they say that the CPUs, which is the Canadian Powerlifting, I'm not sure what the E stands for, to be honest with you.
I have no idea.
But either way, that their trans policy states that an individual should be able to participate in the gender with which they identify and not be subject to requirements for disclosure of personal information beyond those required of cisgender athletes. Also states, nor should there be any requirement for hormonal therapy or surgery. So that basically just says exactly what happened. If a male comes in, says, I'm a female, they say, okay.
There's no requirement for hormone therapy or surgery to compete as a female.
Which obviously has some glaring problems, right? Because, like, literally what happened could happen. A male could
This guy that goes and breaks these records basically totals the same thing I do. So he's basically, totals 1,500 to 1,600 pounds. Man, there's probably only 2 women in the world that total 1,500 pounds. 3, maybe. Like, that are very, 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 like, astoundingly good athletes.
One thing I'm curious about.
You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about, Tamara Walcott, Cece Ingram when she was still in it.
Mm-hmm.
And
did Mariana?
Benika Brown, maybe. She wouldn't have totaled that much. She was too lightweight. Benika Brown, maybe, who is single ply now. So, here I am, live and breathe the sport, and I've come up with only 3 names that total that, and one of them is a single ply athlete.
Right. It says a lot. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, 1,600 pounds. Just to be honest, I've competed either 275 or 308, depending on what I'm weighing. That's a very, very average total for a medium heavyweight man.
Right. Which I think it said he competed at 86 plus kilograms, which I guess is their super heavyweight.
I guess that would be their super heavyweight, but I mean, it's still pretty light for us.
I kind of
86 keys is, so he was 190 pounds, so he was actually pretty strong for his size.
If that's correct. Well, I mean, plus, so if it's their super heavyweight.
I tell you what, that's a very, very light, 190 plus is very, very light for an unlimited weight class.
I could be wrong. I don't see it on here, but I thought that's what
But it doesn't really matter. Anywhere from 200 pounds to 300 pounds, still proves my point. 1,500 to 1,600 pounds is still, while if you're on the lighter end of that weight class, on those weight classes, you're absolutely a little bit better than the heavier dudes. Right. But across that spectrum, I mean, we have people here in Alabama at 220 that total 1,800 pounds. So 1,500 to 1,600 pound total is not a big deal as a man.
Right.
Will it win you some local meets and maybe some state meets? Yeah, I mean, it could. You're probably not winning lifter of the day, but you could definitely take home your weight class with that total. But you're not nationally a beast,
right?
You're pretty much upper intermediate power lifter at best. You know what I mean with that total. So, it's just, and like I said, I just sat here and like really, really thinking about it. I can only name 2 or 3 women in the world that total something like that.
Right.
One of which don't even compete anymore in that. She's a bodybuilder now.
Yeah. And it was talked about on the Mark Bell podcast too, and you can check that out. I think it's only like 30, 45 minutes. Joe Sullivan had some very aggressive comments about the dude that competed, and I actually really like Joe Sullivan. I think he's a good person, and I think he's a great athlete. But I also think he dug in a little hard on this dude, because I feel like everyone is making out this dude to be a villain, but in reality, I don't think he did it just to go there and set some female records. I think he did it to make a point.
To prove a point.
He was just kind of like, hey, this is a problem. I read this rule. I can see where there's a problem here. So we need to fix this problem. I'm going to show you exactly why we need to fix this problem.
And he has done that. Now, regardless of the amount of hate he's done, he's definitely pointed out that, allowed everybody to point out the fact there's some glaring issues in it. Man, I don't know. Even with blood tests, right? So we know that I test low on my natural test levels. Even when I'm using Trenbolone, there's very likelihood, because I've never experienced side effects, that I'm still in a normal testosterone range.
Right.
When I'm using something 5 times more anabolic than testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're doing it based just off of hormones, there's plenty of bigger men like me that have low T.
Yeah.
That probably I would probably test lower than some of my female athletes that don't use drugs, like natural, when I'm not on, just my natural levels. So like, I'm not even sure that's good enough, but they're definitely, to not have a requirement on HRT and to not have a requirement on surgery things really, honestly, I could live with it or without it. I don't really care about the surgery, but to not have a blood test requirement is a glaring issue, right? So
isn't that another slippery slope though? Because like if you're doing a blood test now, and this is something I was going to bring up, it doesn't say whether this is a tested or an untested meat. Now, if you've got someone if you're doing a tested meat, then you have to test them for all this.
Typically P tests, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm struggling to understand if this was a tested meat, because I feel like that's where all this would come from. Because if it's an untested meat, you've got women who are probably on testosterone anyway, and all sorts of other performance
could potentially
drugs.
Level the playing field to some extent.
Against a trans athlete, it's probably at least somewhat more fair, and that's why I'm assuming this is a non-tested. And if it's untested, how is it that you don't look at his testosterone levels and be like, aren't we testing for the same thing when we're doing a drug test that way? Yeah,
I mean they should be. I mean that's the whole idea of it. They're supposed to be.
If he does
exogenous hormones and then PCT drugs should be, and any type of screening agent should be the 3 things that are tested for.
And I don't know the specifics on the drug testing. I don't know how they tell if you're taking exogenous testosterone, but if you're testing it based on the amount of, I guess I'm uneducated in that aspect, but if it's based on how much testosterone is in your body, how can you say
one way or the other? Yeah. I mean, that's, I wish we had somebody closer to the medical field that could speak about the blood work and exactly what that has on it. But I mean, I know that, female sex hormones can cause lower bone density, a decrease in muscle mass, stuff like that. So if somebody is on something like that, even if they were biologically male, they would be at a disadvantage if they were competing against
other males.
Against other males, for sure.
But that's not necessarily going to it's not necessarily going to change your physiology in such a way that you're going to be at a disadvantage going against a biological woman. Yeah. And I think it's pretty slippery. And I do think that these people, if they want to be involved in powerlifting, they should absolutely get to be involved in powerlifting. Mm-hmm. For sure. I don't think this is the solution, but if they are going to continue allowing biological men who have transitioned to women and that identify that way, which I will call them her, it's not a problem for me. If you continue to allow these women to compete against biological women, you have to lift the standard on no HRT requirements. Yeah, for sure. At a minimum, you have to say you've done some degree of therapy, and maybe it's a 3-month minimum, maybe it's a 6-month minimum, maybe it's a 1-year minimum, but you should have to bring in some type of documentation that says you have been actively using some type of hormone replacement therapy to help and aid in your transition in order to compete as a woman. And that's not to try and make this more difficult for a trans woman. This is not stepping on the toes of biological women who have worked hard in the sport. Right. And I think that's where it's really slippery, is that I said in the beginning, I think that your rights end where mine begin. If you are allowing people to compete and it is obviously detrimental to the sport, to women's powerlifting, to the women's sport in general, the inclusion be damned. I mean, I know
My feelings about it here are probably a little bit mixed, to be honest, because I do think they should have a place in powerlifting. I do think they should be able to do what we do and everything else. But from a coach's standpoint, if I go take one of my stronger girls, especially if I take Heather Calvert or Casey to a powerlifting meet, knowing that they're going to those girls total 1,000 pounds. If I take them to a powerlifting meet and they get crushed by somebody, and they may not believe the same way I do, they may be perfectly fine with this, but if they go get crushed by somebody that was born biologically male, I don't care how long they were on HRT, I'm going to be pretty livid as a coach.
Yeah.
Because I know how hard those girls have worked to get there. I've witnessed how hard they've worked to get there. And I wouldn't necessarily view it as fair.
Yeah.
From a competitive standpoint, I don't know that I would be able to mentally recover from that. In which case, the really fun thing about those two girls is they absolutely possess the ability to go. They total 1,000 pounds now when they're healthy and they're in the gym. They absolutely have the ability to be 1,200 pound totalers one day as women. Mm-hmm. So equally, and maybe in an unfair way, I would probably feel a lot of pride for them if they went out and drug a trans woman's ass in a powerlifting meet. No offense to that woman, but
I mean, it would.
There is a glaring difference, dude. And we talked about Leah Thomas, who swam for UPenn, wasn't a top 50 male swimmer collegiately, and then transitions and then goes and absolutely crushes women's swimming. Mm-hmm. Crushes it, not even by a little bit. Breaks 100-year-old records, things that we never thought were possible by a woman, by a biologically born female.
Yeah.
Man, it's a tough spot, and I don't want to sound like a bigot, but I feel very torn in two different directions on this, just because my voting, the way I vote politically, I'm a libertarian. I vote third party. It is right leaning, but we very, very much support gay and trans rights. Because we feel as though it's just not our business what somebody wants to do in their personal time. Mm-hmm. It does not affect me. I do not lose sleep over what you identify as. I am not going to judge your character or your ability to be a friend of mine based off of what you identify as or how you are. But I do feel like we've gone so far in terms of women's rights and what they can do in the workplace and what their political opinions. What we do with them in sports, how they perform in sports. The NBA is doing a great job of lifting up the WNBA, which, by the way, if you watch basketball, women's basketball is a much purer form of the game than men's basketball is. It's a wonderful sport that probably needs its recognition. We've come a long way for women. Have we gone so far for women that now we are actually doing damage to them? Because you brought up a point. And I'm sure there are examples of men, trans men that are competing as a man somewhere, but you're not seeing news headlines of a biologically female person that has transitioned to manhood going and crushing men's powerlifting records.
Right. Because biologically, they're at a disadvantage. You think about...
In terms of frame, in terms of muscle mass, in terms of bone density.
Just all you have to do is relate this back to untested women's powerlifting and compare their records to men's records. That's all you have to do, because they have basically all the advantages of a man by taking the exogenous testosterone and all the other drugs. I mean, even...
Hell, you can compare them to non-tested men. Tested men, you can compare non-tested women to tested men.
It gets probably it might get a little closer.
It probably gets a little closer specifically on squat, but I bet it don't on bench and deadlift.
Oh, for sure on bench. There are some strong deadlifters.
For sure, yeah.
Female deadlifters. I mean, you can look at someone like Heather Henderson. I want to say she has a 600... Yeah, Hunter Henderson. Did I say Heather?
She has a 600 plus pound deadlift, yeah.
Did I say Heather by it?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I meant Hunter Henderson.
Yeah.
But yeah, she has 600 pounds on her squat, and I think on her deadlift too. Yeah. She benches 275, which I mean, don't
It's
get
a
me
mean bench press for a lady.
absolutely,
Yeah.
but
I actually think it's in the 300s, but
it might have gotten.
she's one of those. She's one I forgot about, but she's one of those rare 4 or 5 women on the planet that have a 1,500 pound total.
Right, but she's also
enhanced,
and
open about it.
Yeah, she talked about it on the Mark Bell podcast.
Yeah.
Talk about what she takes, but like you can obviously see like there's just a difference.
Yeah.
Like even I forget what her weight class is, but I don't know any records.
So she's a 181.
Probably she's pretty jacked, so she's probably 181. I don't know of any 181 bench presser record that's going to be 275 or 300.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we can think of multiple men at 181 here in the state of Alabama that total 1,600 plus.
I mean,
specifically Jawan Garrison.
I was about to say, look at Jawan Garrison. Yeah. He's a
of course. I think he may be 198 now, but still, you're still talking about. I mean, Ron started at 181 and had 1,500 plus pound total.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and not even really having to think about it, we've named 2 in Alabama, not worldwide, men that do that, and we can only come up with maybe 5 worldwide women that do that.
Right. So there's just very clear something's not right with the way we're approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I'm not 100% sure that they're ever going to be satisfied with transgender people having their own category. I think that's the most obvious solution.
I think it's the most fair solution.
It is. I think it is the most fair solution, to be honest with you, 100%. I just don't think, the people that are in support of this, I'm not 100% sure they think 100% logically about fairness. So I think the compromise ultimately is going to have to be an HRT standard of 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it may be. You have to be able to prove that you were on some type of female hormone replacement therapy for X amount of time to get to compete as a woman.
Right.
And I'm still not 100% sure that that's fair, to be honest with you. I mean,
I've got 2 points that I want to bring up. And the first one, so in the thing about fairness, I have a friend who's a lawyer. He has always told me when it comes to law and divorce and things like that, it's split 50-50, right? When things are fair, nobody is happy. Right?
Yeah.
Because you don't get as much as you want, you don't get as much as you want. But here's the thing, being down in the middle, that's what it comes out to be. That is ultimately what is fair.
Yeah.
Nobody ends up happy.
And just. Yeah.
Right. So in regards to that, I do think that, moving to a trans class is probably the best solution, and it may not make everybody happy, but in this regard, they have their own records to set. So they have a specific record set just for them. So they may not, I understand where you're coming from. They probably don't feel included because they're identifying as a female and they want to compete as a female, but they have to compete as transgender because they're transitioning from male to female. And I guess I understand that, but I feel like it's the only way to make it fair for both transgendered and female competitors, right? Now, when you say it like that, there might only be a handful of transgender competitors, so it might be like, well, there's only like 3 in Alabama ever, and then they're all
in different weight classes.
They're all in different weight classes,
age groups.
So there's not a lot of competition other than trying to set something internationally or worldwide or whatever. But I feel like that's the only way to protect women in the sport moving forward. I do also want to say, I think it is completely fair. Well, maybe not completely fair, but I think it is a lot more fair for a transgender person to compete in an untested female event because there are so many other factors at play.
The other girls can be on.
The other girls can be on whatever they want. They're transitioning, so they're taking.
It probably does even the playing field.
Now, and it could not. You could be like, well, they're not testing me, so I'm gonna come off my estrogen for however long and get some of my, male genetics back and blow up the records. It's kind of, it's
slippery. That may be the most realistic. I don't know. If you're transgendered, you have to compete non-tested.
That's probably, that in truth, that is probably the fairest split down the middle. There is
I'll be honest with you. I don't think we're anywhere close to real change or progress in this rule. I think it will continue to be an issue until. I wouldn't encourage men to do this just to be an asshole. And I'm not necessarily encouraging men to do this in general because I really don't think you should be a bigot. I think you should respect people and stay in their lane. But I think what it's ultimately going to take is, a couple dozen other guys seeing what this guy just did and being like, you know what?
I'm going to prove a point today.
I'm going to do it, yeah. And I think that the only way that's going to be effective is if they have the support of other women in powerlifting. I don't think it can just be men go out and say, this is what I'm going to do. I think it's going to have to be supported by womanhood. And I'll be honest with you, women are much more willing to say, I'm okay with this than we are probably. They're much more likely to have, their heartstrings tugged at and be empathetic about something like this, which could be to some extent to their own detriment. But, maybe women don't mind, but I know that my girls would.
Yeah.
Even if they wouldn't say so publicly, I know that they would be very upset about losing a powerlifting meet to a biological male. At that point, another solution that nobody's talked about is a completely open competition and moving everything toward dots.
Yeah.
And just doing away with anything other than with any gender class at all, with the exception of weight class. And being like, hey, and you know what though? That's unfair to men at that point because strong women almost always have better dot scores than men.
It's true.
So you could look at it like that. I would expect if major change happened from professional organizations, WRPF and stuff like that, I would suspect they would move to open competition, open genderless competition, and do everything by dots to begin with. Man, but then you'll never with that rule, you'll never see a man on the platform again.
Right. I hate to say it like this. Is that just going to push transgendered
on the winners platform? By the way,
yeah, because they're going to have the advantage of being listed as a female on dots and have genetics of a man. I don't know how that's fair to anybody at that point.
I'm not sure that it is, and I think that's what we're looking at, though. That's the only thing you can talk about is possible solutions, and just politically, I'm just telling you, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point that they're going to get their own class. So it's either install some type of HRT requirement, which is technically thinking about it now is probably a violation of HIPAA. That's probably the reason why that
could be
exists to begin with. Or 100% open competition where I'm competing against every man, woman, transition person in the room. But again, like I said, you will never, ever see a man on the podium again.
If you do it that way.
You do it that way. And now I'm not necessarily saying that men have to be on the podium, but men that work hard don't have, it's unfair to disqualify them from lifter of the day and things like that when they were the strongest person there just because they're the wrong gender. Well, that's basically the message you're sending with that. But I'm thinking that that's probably the more likely thing to happen, though.
Yeah. I think personally, I don't know about big organizations when it comes to Olympic weightlifting and stuff like that. But when it comes to powerlifting, you've got different federations all, throughout the United States in different areas. I feel like you're probably just going to have to look for the one that appeals to you the most, because I don't think they're all going to fall under one banner. I don't think they're all going to unify and say, we're going to do this this way.
They will.
I think, and that may be a selling point for them. They may be like, hey, we do this that caters more to the transgendered. So come to our federation and compete here. And then there may be some that are like, we're really hard right. We're only doing male and female. That's it. Whatever you biologically are born by, that's it.
I can tell you some of the major single-ply and multiply organizations, APF, RPS, they're not going to put up with that.
Yeah.
They're not. It'll stay male, female. And if you're transitioned of any type, you won't compete with them. I just about bet you money that's not going to fucking happen.
Yeah.
Period.
I mean,
SPF probably
fair.
the same way.
Yeah, I was thinking SPF.
But I don't think those people should be punished for transitioning. That's not what I think at all. I do think that though that there is some definite differences, and I think that you saw it this weekend. And the same way that the trans lady's records got crushed by a cisgendered male who identified as a woman for a day, she did the same thing to another woman.
Yeah.
Recently. She's been king shit queen shit, I guess, for a while. You know what I mean? Like, she basically took that title the same way. And I know she's been transitioning and had the surgery and stuff for a while, but you know, she stepped on that platform and ruined some other woman's hard work and dedication. Yeah. And
not to say that, you know, she didn't work hard or have any dedication. No, I know she worked hard. I mean, you have to.
She probably had to work twice as hard because hormones are a hell of a thing, man. And let me tell you, being in the middle, you know, I just had to quit my TRT cold turkey because I found out the specific type of stuff I was doing was dangerous to my pregnant wife. And I have lived through past couple of weeks over an estrogen spike, basically. And how that makes you feel is incredibly shitty. So I have no doubt. I know for a fact from my own experience with exogenous hormones that having excess estrogen in your system will make you feel like shit. It will decrease performance. It will ruin things. That being said,
but you're still bench pressing 275 for 4.
Yeah, after 60 reps. You know what I mean? So I'm probably still good for 315 for an 8-piece on a healthy day. So like,
right.
With no hormones in my system and you know, free test level of about 80 probably right now. So like,
it's hard.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard. It's really hard to pick a side.
I bet I still deadlift over 5. I bet I still squat over 4 right now. You know what I mean? So
I don't. That's the problem, is that I don't think it's fair to have to pick a side. I think we need to pick a solution that makes either everybody happy or nobody happy, and it's going to end up being nobody is happy with whatever the solution is.
I also think that transgendered athletes would probably be, and left-leaning supporters of them would probably be happy with the dots.
Yeah.
But that, I'm telling you, you said, that you may very well likely never see, because you get points on dots and Wilks just for being female. So if a biological male puts their total into a dots calculator and clicks female, they're automatically going to get more points than if they switch it back to male. So, I mean, like, you may never see a biological man or a biological woman on a podium again, you know, if that happens. On a national level, like I said, there's not enough of these people locally to probably do that, but you're still talking about, you know, like Brandon, who was a coach of mine at Kern one year, dropped a $40,000 deadlift. You know, he was going to beat Yuri Belkin if he picked that weight up. And he dropped it at the top of his lift, and it cost him $40,000. That's money that man needed for his own business, for his own family, his own well-being. That's money that man earned, and he wouldn't even be in the conversation if you go to a system that caters to them. So you're talking about a man that has dedicated his entire life to the sport. That's his livelihood. He has never seen that. He's a personal trainer and a very successful one. I know he makes a good living, but $40,000 was life-changing money to him. It was enough to pay off a truck or pay off the house or pay off whatever. Like, to think that those people, and then also women in the same situation, don't have a shot at that $40,000, it's pretty
hard to swallow.
It'd be pretty hard to swallow. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, at least he got to go to that meet knowing that he was in the fight. If you go to an all-dot system, genderless classes,
it's almost
the strongest men. You'll never get to see the strongest men and potentially the strongest women in the world on a podium again in powerlifting.
Yeah,
and that's a slippery thing. I would like to say this too. I would like some more insight, maybe some less right-leaning insight from either somebody that has transitioned or even maybe a gay man or gay woman that compete actively in powerlifting, and to see where they are actually on this. Because somebody like, World's Strongest Gay, what's his name?
I know that name, but I can't think
Rob
of
Kearney.
Okay.
I would like to hear his point of view on that. Like,
But
would he feel good? He's got the world record for elephant bar deadlifts, an incredibly strong man. If he were to choose to do that, would he think it's fair for him to go
to a dot, or
no? Would he think it would be fair for him to go compete as a woman in women's and strong woman basically
Right.
competitions? I'd be willing to bet that that's a very, very liberal, left leaning man. I would be willing to bet that he probably doesn't agree with that.
right?
I mean, I would from somebody that's in the sport and lives it. I bet that he wouldn't think it was fair for him to transition and then go compete as a pro strong woman.
And I think, I mean,
Like the worst. I mean, where's his deadlift go? He goes a 600 or 700 pound deadlift.
right? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
that's still like.
world
Has there
records
been a girl outside of multipod deadlift 700 yet?
outside of
Outside of multipod?
700? I don't think so.
I mean, I know that Denny
think-
stones weigh about 700. There's been multiple women pick them up, but that's still not a conventional deadlift.
Yeah, I think
know what I mean?
600 or the 600 mark has been kind of like the goal.
And it's been broken a few times.
Yeah,
by a handful of women.
It's around the 600 mark. It might be 650. I feel like I've seen a woman pull 650
So 700 is basically the female 1100.
Yeah.
Like, so, I
Think
don't
about
know.
how many people can lift 1100.
Right now, 2 people in the world. Well, 3 if you can't count Dan Grigsby's going to do it.
He's gonna do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So 3 people in the world, all 3 of them male.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's like I said, I don't want to sound like a bigot, but
But you don't want
it is from a coaching standpoint, there is a glaring unfairness about it all, and it just is what it is.
I already know the answer to this, but would you train a trans athlete?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Would you push them to compete as their assumed or transition gender?
We would take care of whatever. We would take advantage of whatever rules are currently in place, whether I believe them or not. I mean, it's the same at that point. It's the same thing as having a high archer on bench press. Until our organizations that we compete in start judging elbow depth on bench. Do I like it? No. But my job at that point is to make sure you go win.
Right.
So, I don't think, I'll be honest with you, I probably wouldn't allow them to go compete against their teammates in the same meet.
That's fair, I think. That's
You know what I mean? And that may be, that might be a weird line to draw because there's other women that are going to fall victim to that too. But they're not going to go rub that in the face of their teammates.
Right.
So a stranger, fine. But you're not going to go compete against your teammate and beat them knowing
By
that
300 pounds.
by 300 pounds, knowing they worked every bit of as hard as you, and But yeah, I mean, I would absolutely train one, and I would be diplomatic and fair. And until there's rules in place that says they can't do it, or there's a standard for them to do it, we would take advantage of whatever rules in place currently.
Would you think you would?
I would say this, though, in the state of Alabama, even though I would do it because ethically I think it's the right thing to do as a coach, I don't think you turn anybody down I don't think you judge anybody for their situation or whatever. I think ethically as a coach, you take home the person that hires you and you train them the same way you would train anybody else. That's the upstanding and moral and ethical thing to do. But until there's a rule in place, I mean, I would probably take advantage of it from a coach's standpoint.
Would you lean towards them competing untested, or would you tell them?
I would probably have a very serious conversation with them. Is you're not going to go compete USAPL. You're not going to compete USPA drug tested. You will compete in a non-tested meet, so that at least
there's some level of fairness.
A very candid conversation about that, but that conversation would be had. And even though I would coach them, and this is the point I was trying to get to, I'll be honest with you, it probably would be career suicide in the state of Alabama.
Yeah. Or,
I would expect potential bans from meets to come, or just, basically just a court of public opinion ostracizing one or the other.
Right. Kind of like blacklisted by the public, but not necessarily by the organization.
Yeah, I would expect that to come in the state of Alabama.
I think
that being said, I mean, 100%. I mean, I'm telling you, it's the ethical, moral, correct thing to do to train that person and train them fairly.
I think that's completely fair. I also think that maybe I don't know that this would be the case if it were to go to that extreme that you're talking about. And it may not. Even though Alabama is still very far right, we do have some very far left-leaning people in the state of Alabama. Even if it did get to the point where you were like banned from coaching at some specific organization because you brought this person or whatever, I think that would just open up more talk, and I think that would probably be a push for change.
It could be, yeah, absolutely.
Because people would see that like, that's totally unfair. Why is this guy who coached this person banned just because of what they like?
If you look at it just from a professional standpoint, their money's as good as anybody's.
Yeah.
Their money spends the same. This is not judging them on a person or anything. Just based on they hired me for professional service.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when I coach people, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And it would become that with them too. But just on that, like, legally, by federal law, you can't even really turn that person down. You know what I mean? So even if you're not talking about morals and ethics and the right thing to do,
well,
legally you can't say no. I mean, you could say, I'm full at the moment or something like that. But like, yeah, I mean, I would train them.
Yeah.
And I would treat them the same as anybody else. I mean, that's the truth. But I would probably warn them that I expect rule changes to come. I would tell them for my own moral and ethical reasons, just like I wouldn't turn them down from training, I wouldn't allow them to compete in a drug-tested event. Because let me tell you something, even if it's doing the opposite to them, they're still taking exogenous hormones.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, don't care that it's estrogen. You're still technically pinning.
Right.
Sorry, but I mean that's the truth. You're pinning something.
Yeah.
So like, I definitely, if I got to the point where I had a, I don't even know. You had a woman transition into manhood. If you had a trans man competing, I don't know where I'd push them to be honest with you. I think on that situation, there's probably much less threat of them, unless they're in a weight class by themselves or with a brand new person, there's much less threat of them taking the podium.
Yeah. At that point, it may be.
But I wouldn't turn them down either. If that's what they wanted to do, we would do it.
I guess at that point, like female to male, it would be, you can compete in an untested female event. Should be fine. I don't see any reason why that would be an issue. You could also compete as a male, but you put yourself at such a disadvantage that would you really want to? And I think that's the sad part. And I mean, I'm a pessimist, so this is the way I view the world. I feel like a lot of these people who are transitioned are only competing as a female to take the record. Like, they're not doing it because I'm a female. They're not doing it because I love powerlifting.
You think there's a self-serving interest beyond
I feel like there is.
Gender, yeah.
I feel like there is. And I feel like that's why people would get so uppity about a trans class, right? Because people would be like, well, I don't want to compete as a trans. I want to compete as a woman so I can beat the women's records. Yeah. I don't want to set a trans record.
But nobody's going to admit that publicly.
No, nobody will ever say that publicly. No one will ever like that.
Another slippery slope is like, what about non-binary people? Do they just get to choose one day?
Right.
Whether they're competing as a man or a woman?
I guess we haven't really had that come up,
that's where we're headed. I mean, that's the next step. I mean, if you're talking about people that have transitioned, what about people that have no intent of transitioning and just don't identify as either? Or may identify as multiple things.
Right.
I think there's a psychology with it that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of ways I feel very underqualified to talk about all this, but I do think the root of the matter, we have to sit and look at what we're actually doing to women's rights.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what it all boils down to. That's the whole reason why this is even an argument, is because it's stepping on all the women before them that have set these records, broken these records. Like,
yeah, I think that most women in my life probably feel the same way you do about this. I would say the vast majority of the women in my life feel that they shouldn't be able to compete with them. But society now, because of social media, society now has to bend the knee to a very, very loud and very, very minority,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like.
And the reason why is because a lot of people support that.
You're talking about a class of person that absolutely deserves rights, absolutely deserves to be able to be in the sport, absolutely deserves everything that we do. But you're also talking about a class of person that affects. You're talking about probably 1% or less of the population. Mm-hmm. Talking about a finite number of transgender people in general, let alone transgender people that are willing to compete in a strength sport.
Right.
So we are bending over backwards nationally, probably for a dozen people at best.
Right. I was going to say a handful. There can't be a ton, because we would hear this more often if there was a ton.
Well, I go to a powerlifting meet a month. I would see it.
Yeah. They would be.
It's not like I'm not involved in the sport. Hell, I got one coming up this month. I have one coming up next month. I don't know that I have one in June. I got one in July. I got one, like shit. I mean, they're talking about somebody that competes or coaches in, 5 to 10 a year.
Yeah.
Like I'm in powerlifting regularly, and we don't see it. And part of that's because where we're at, but we're also, I'm taking Dave Hayes in July to New Orleans. That's a much more likely place to see something like that. It's nationals, so it probably won't. Right. But much more likely place to see something like that than here in Alabama. But also we're to a degree, where does it stop too? Another good example of this is Elizabeth did the women's transformation category last year. Anybody that's trained women know that when you're training a woman for weight loss, if all things are equal, it is much, much harder to get a woman to lose weight consistently than it is a man if everything is equal in it. Mm-hmm. What stops somebody from transitioning and competing in that too? Yeah. That's an unfair advantage. Hell, man, I've had male clients that have lost 20 pounds from making them quit drinking sweet tea.
Right.
Or say, hey, no regular sodas, no sweet tea, and they can drop 20 pounds.
Right.
I don't know. I think, I haven't heard about this issue being an issue in bodybuilding yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Right. But
then you're talking about the physical. Think about somebody that was born male in like women's physique and how incredibly damaging that would be to one of the bigger classes of women, you know what I mean? One of the really muscular classes of women.
Right.
That'd be incredibly damning for those women.
Yeah.
And then you're going to tell me at that point they probably wouldn't be on their HRT.
No.
Because it'd be counterproductive to the other drugs that they're on. So you going to let Nick Walker put a bikini on and go compete against you? I mean, I'm being serious. Probably not. You know what I mean?
There would be a whole lot of unfairness in that.
It seems like it'd be pretty unfair. Yeah, absolutely. Even if he taped all the junk back, got it chopped off, whatever you want to do. Nick Walker can quit lifting for the next 6 months, and he's still going to be bigger than every female on that stage.
Yep.
So man, I think it's slippery, and I think it's dangerous, and I think that I really do. I'm genuine in saying that I support those people and their rights and the betterment of their community and their place in the world. But while we're carving out a place in the world, we also already have to keep in mind the people that already have that are all equally entitled to a place in this world. And I think what we've done is we have disregarded somebody else's place in this world to make a place for somebody else.
I don't know if you would know this far back in the history of powerlifting, because I don't know. But I'm curious. There probably weren't a whole lot of female powerlifters at the beginning of the sport. Probably a lot of males. So when women came in and said, I want to do that too, what did we do? Open up a female class for them to compete in?
Yeah.
Right? doesn't it just make sense to do the same thing? Right? Like it just.
Well, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Like, I mean, to some degree, sense and logic
thrown out the door.
Has been thrown out the door to some extent. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I am like solid in that opinion that there should just be a transgendered class. And then, you can, I don't know if there would be a reason to have it tested or untested because they're going to be on some type of hormones or they're going to come off of their hormones or whatever to get a better total. But I mean, it just, at least at that point, you're protecting the women. You're protecting the men from grouping everybody into one singular class other than weight classes. It's just going to be if you just do dots. And then they have their own records, they have their own weight classes, they compete, and they can still win lifter of the day.
Yeah.
And maybe their dot score changes by, I don't know, a couple points or something compared to a natural born woman. Maybe there's some amount that they can change it. I feel like that's just, and in the spirit of inclusion and powerlifting, there are so many weight classes and there's so many divisions. Like
it's already a divided sport.
There's so much like that you can be like, well, I'm in this and I'm in this and we're competing together, but we're not actually competing against each other. It's already extremely inclusive in that sense. So I don't understand why it's such a conversation, to be honest, because it's been like that for this long.
One could argue, and this is a good way to look at this too, that maybe we're wasting breath worrying about it right now because we've already said, by our own admission, we're probably talking about a dozen to 2 dozen people nationwide.
Yeah,
which means it's not going to ever affect my girls anyway, more than
right.
Unless in a very, very potentially very elite circumstance is the only time it would affect my women. So in another way, maybe we should just shrug our shoulders and be like, hey, this isn't happening everywhere. No big deal. Like,
I guess.
I mean, there's a coaching side of me that makes me want to go, she used to be a he, fucking beat them anyway.
Right.
Beat them anyway. There's a part of that in me too. You know what I mean? That just says, you're talking about so few people. While there does need to be rules in place that increases fairness, you're also talking about so few people. You have to ask yourself, if, to some extent, does this matter anyway?
Right, because like I think we already said this, but there's so few that they'd be competing against themselves 90% of the time, or competing against the record book. So it's kind of hard to, because when they did add women into the sport, there was a lot more women than there are trans.
By and large, I'll be honest with you. Take Heather Calvert again. She's in the 220 weight class right now. There's not many 220 men she's going to beat that have a lot of experience. But your average gym bro between 200 and 220 pounds, Heather will beat the hell out of him.
Yeah.
Honest to God. I have actively been in the gym and tried to get men to take bets over who would squat more between her and them. Seriously. You know what I mean? So, even still, you think you have to look at the nature of this person that's transitioning too. Were they a power lifter before they transitioned? That'd be a good question to ask.
Yeah.
Do you hold male records, or have you competed X amount of times as a male? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the qualifying standard we should look at. Were you a competitive power lifter before you transitioned? If so, you probably don't belong here in the women's category. You know what I mean?
But also that kind of puts a bad taste in people's mouth. They're like, well, I didn't decide I was a woman until this point in my life. I still love powerlifting.
That's true. But you also have to think that you get a washed up top 50 in the world that's no longer competitive as a male, that's seeing his name drop down.
Yeah.
Open powerlifting week by week. His name's a little bit further down the list. Might be self-serving, but there's very real possibility that he says, you know what?
I'm going to compete as female.
Be nationally relevant again. Yeah. You'll get your attention if you go do that, for sure. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm not 100% sure there's a correct. I know what fair is, and fair is exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. They get their own division. Trans men category, trans women category.
Do you think it'd be unfair to put them all together?
So I think it'd be unfair to put them all together.
I don't know that it would be unfair.
It probably would be it's probably a more even playing field than a biological male transitioning and competing as a female right now.
Yeah.
It'd probably be a more even playing field, but no, they won't like that.
Yeah. Because then someone will be upset about
and then,
the other.
How long is our powerlifting meet day now, too? I mean, like, then you have to add a non-binary category? Like, you're going to do that? You know what I mean?
But the only reason why our days are so long is just because of the amount of lifters,
yeah, I mean,
right?
they can still cap it and stuff. So, like, it is what it is. I think we are talking about something that we will probably never have to experience firsthand.
Probably not.
Likelihood.
Probably not. But
the internet has a weird way of making the world seem much smaller than it is.
Truthfully, me and you, as men, will never.
No, we won't.
We will never see that. It'll only be the women in our lives that will see it.
Yeah.
If they see it at all.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I mean, my coaching advice is train harder and beat them anyway.
Yeah.
Especially if they're competing non-tested. Man, we can put you on whatever you want to be on, too. We can get you there.
Yeah.
Truthfully. But, you know, and that might be the philosophy that I adopt, honestly, because I just don't know
if there's enough.
I don't know if there's enough. The problem is there's not enough support in any of these directions to get any of this done. I don't think there's enough. I don't even know that there's enough for it to stay currently. Yeah. I think ultimately, honestly, the most likely thing, if there aren't any rule changes, the most likely thing is that these federations come out and say, hey, we don't like this. We're not doing it. We're done with it.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked out. We're done with it. You know, outside of, we already said there's a possibility that that's a HIPAA violation to ask them things about.
Right.
About everything else. So the easier path might just be to be like, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
But by the same token, we live in a wonderful place that if you don't like how something's organized, you can start your own.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the most fair thing. A new organization that is tolerant of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily that we're intolerant of these things, but a new federation that is tailored to these things. You know what I mean? I'd support it, and I would be honest. The only way to do it again would still be open gender classes, weight classes only. You know,
dots is everything.
Dots is everything over total. That's the only way they could do it themselves. If a transgendered person started a federation tomorrow, that would be the only way. In their hearts, they'd have to know that's the only way they could do that in a fair manner.
Right. Unless they just did maybe a transgendered only class or something.
That's not what they want.
Yeah, that's not what they want. They want to be included.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think that they should be included.
I think there's definitely.
I think the way that they're included now is unfair to women. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think, man, I know at risk of sounding real bigoted on this whole thing, but I think the whole thing is pretty slippery in all directions, man. Mm-hmm. We were basically like at a point, and it doesn't matter which side of the mountain you go down, you're probably busting your ass.
Right. I mean,
truthfully.
That is true. I don't know. All I know is I just want it to be fair for everybody. Like that's
right now, honestly. I mean, if and those situations are not fair for everybody. Yeah. Do I think it was fair for the transgendered woman to get beat by just her ass absolutely drugged by that dude? It probably wasn't fair. That being said, that's the problem. That is exactly what their rules allow.
Yep.
It allows me to say tomorrow I'm a woman and I'm competing in a women's weight class Saturday, or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. At the end of the week, I'm going to go compete. That's regardless of what side of this you're on. You have to see that there's a flaw in that. Because if you don't like what this guy did, you're going to have to keep fucking eating it. Because your rules state that he ain't got to show you nothing.
Yep. He can just show up.
He can just show up.
I'm a woman.
Yep. So you got to decide what you really want. Because, a lot of there's men in this world that are not as kind-hearted as me and Nathan that will show up and beat you just to prove a point. And that point was made this week.
Yep.
So
I think it was actually last week.
Last Saturday.
I think it was definitely.
It's been within a 2-week time.
Yeah, it's definitely
2-week period. But here a 2-week span, you have seen somebody say, "I think I feel like a woman today." Put on a Shania Twain song, fucking suited up in a singlet, and went and fucking crushed records.
Yep. And didn't bother to shave.
And didn't even bother to shave. Went out full beard, competed as a woman. But that is what
that's what
the Canadian powerlifting's rules allow.
Yep.
So, like, I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of curious if Canadian powerlifting is going to strip him of any of his win or any of his records.
I feel like the only way they have any right to do so is if they change the rules.
Yeah, if they do it retroactively, it still doesn't affect him. They can't say this rule. The best they can do is this rule's in place, April 9th, 2023. That doesn't do anything for April 2nd, 2023.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But I feel like you would have to, like, if you were going to take his records away, you would have to say, we're changing these rules, and this is why we're taking your record away. You couldn't just be like, we're taking your record away.
I think it would leave them open to be for a giant lawsuit. And that guy, and now, again, I completely and totally believe this guy was being an asshole. But that leaves that guy open. He would be within his rights to fucking sue their fucking faces off. He can make whatever claim he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
And there ain't a person on this planet that knows what he's feeling inside. He could 100% never have any intentions of being a woman and sit there and tell you that all day long, and there's nothing the court of law could do about it. Nothing. Not any witness testimony, nothing could change what's happening internally in that man. Yep. So, like, he can say what he wants to. Mm-hmm. The power's in that guy's hands. Like, that record's probably not going to get stripped.
Mm-mm.
If it does, I'm sure there will be legal ramifications for it. Of course, Canada is, basically northern Cuba now and incredibly, socialistic and stuff like that. There's a possibility it goes to whatever equivalent to the Supreme Court that they have, and, they strike all this shit down and he eats shit anyway, but, like, not without a very, very long and very, very expensive process for, that being said, though, that'd be pretty hypocritical of them. The government of Canada being extremely left-leaning right now, mm-hmm. and to take a man's record, on the day of competition, a woman's records mm-hmm. away because he didn't shave before he went up there to do it.
Right.
So, I think Canada powerlifting has found themselves in a catch-22.
They really have.
There's no real out for them, I don't think.
There's not a good answer at all for them currently. The only thing we can do in the United States is look at this and be like, we need to figure something out before this happens.
Yeah, but look at us.
That's true.
I mean, listen, man, I really do think, I believe this, and minorities have voices, should have voices and stuff like that, but you have social media that has allowed the smallest portions, fringe people in society, that deserve their rights. But you have allowed the fringe in society to call all the shots in a nation that largely does not feel the same way that they do. Mm-hmm. And a supposedly democratic nation. That's slippery, dude. It's a scary thing politically, and I know we don't have too many political conversations on here, but I mean, I think it sets a bad precedence. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you the precedent. This is what people don't understand about precedents, right? If you do something and it becomes, okay, people have a problem with, like, this is the reason I believe in separation of church and state, right? If our entire government's run by evangelical Christians, which in the state of Alabama it pretty much is, right? If those people come out and say, hey, we no longer like or support non-evangelicals, so we don't like Catholics, we don't like Lutherans, and we don't like any other religion, and we're going to make laws fixed against these people. What that does is when those people become in power, it sets a precedence for them to do the same shit to you. Mm-hmm. That's why that shit's slippery. That's the reason why separation of church and state exists, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so that just because you're just so a bunch of assholes can't set rules in place that eventually will be turned around and used against them. That's the precedence you're setting. You're setting a precedence for religious intolerance at that point, mm-hmm. right? Well, the other things apply and everything else too. Like if you set some type of racial intolerance, apart from that being ethically like piss poor, mm-hmm. you're setting a precedence for somebody to do that to your people eventually too. And we've done that a lot in America, if you think about it. We have set
your people.
With your ethnic class, like it is what it is. But if you do those things, though, if you're an asshole, you're setting a precedence for somebody to be an asshole back. And you know what? At that point, it's fucking fair because you've already set the precedent that you're an asshole.
Yep.
So I think we should be careful, is what I'm saying, about what precedents we set.
Right.
Because if you're shitty to somebody, you're setting a precedence for them to be shitty back eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a dangerous, I mean, it's just, you run your mouth, you get fucking hit in the face. You have set the precedence. You set the tone for that fucking rock jaw that you're fucking toting. People should think about that, and they don't. And it happens on every level of politics, every level of life. Like
social media has done that a lot.
Simply, if you disrespect somebody else, you are setting a precedence to be disrespected back, and you probably deserve it. So I think that we need to be careful. Be very, very, very careful about what precedents we set. And if there is to some extent, and I support those people's rights, I've said it a million times, but if you bury somebody else's rights to build yours up, you are setting a precedence for yours to be buried back. Mm-hmm. And the dangerous thing about a very, very fringe minority having as much voice as they do is they're actually making situations more dangerous for themselves. Because what it does is people that are actually hard right, that are actually psychopaths, that actually want the government to fall, that the South will rise again bullshit, those people are fucking serious, and you're making the world a more dangerous place for yourself when you start overstepping.
Yeah, because
those people will take advantage. Those people will be assholes because they've already set a precedence themselves that they're going to be assholes.
Yep.
The Civil War set that precedence.
Right.
Those people wanted to be assholes, and guess what? If you live down here, you know that they're still assholes. You know what I mean? Like, for a fact. Like, so, like, I think that you got to be very, very careful what you do. I mean, 100%. I mean, that's, man, it's dangerous. It absolutely is.
I think we covered a lot and didn't get a whole lot of answers.
Well, that's the problem. I don't think there's a whole lot of. I would love to have this conversation again with a more diverse panel of people. I would like to talk to women. I would like to talk to
not too straight white males.
Not too straight white males talking on it, because one thing I do know is that we don't live this life and we do lack insight.
Yeah.
And that's something that I believe, and I'm very empathetic toward fringe people in general. I think most of my friends are fit in some type of fringe category, if that makes sense. Not necessarily LGBTQ plus, but I do have those friends. So I am sympathetic and empathetic with those people, and I do think it's probably a little unfair for me and you to sit here and spill all this stuff without some type of guidance for all these things too. But I'll tell you too, I feel like most people that are going to have this conversation with any type of logic or reason is going to have it in a calm manner. While their opinions may be different about it, I bet they're not that far off.
Right. No, I would agree. And I think me and you, since we're active in powerlifting, but we're not active in women's powerlifting, but we are spectators of women's powerlifting. So we can look at it from that perspective. Like, would I want to go out there and watch, from a spectator standpoint, a transgender woman compete against these other women? And what I feel, it's kind of like, I know you don't watch a lot of wrestling, but it's kind of like when you watch a wrestling match and you've got two dudes wrestling or whatever, and then a woman gets involved and like slaps them when the referee isn't looking or something. It's like, well, that's not fair. Right?
Right.
Like, just there's some level of this that's just like, you just kind of look at it and you're like, I'm kind of just disappointed because that just doesn't seem fair.
And, the precedence it sets, this is a big thing too. Is it a big deal in strength sports? Probably not. We're not in a contact sport.
Yeah.
But what kind of precedence would it set in
like MMA,
women's
UFC.
basketball, or there's very few women's football leagues now, but a women's football league or a combat sport.
Yeah.
That precedence has already been set, right? Wasn't there a trans woman that absolutely beat the hell out of their competition, like broken bones, stuff like that?
I think you're right. I think I
orbital fractures, right? Didn't it cause some orbital fractures? I think in the lady that competed against the new lady, the recently acquired womanhood person. So man, it would be incredibly dangerous in a contact sport. And I think the more Oh man, I don't know. I'd be curious about the WNBA is a very, very left leaning organization, right? What would they say about a former NBA player transitioning and coming and playing with them?
Right.
Maybe it wouldn't matter that much. I don't know. Especially like I said, I think that women's basketball is a pure form of the sport, and they play a little better ball anyway. Like in terms of strategically how the game's supposed to be played, I feel like women's basketball is a much purer form of the sport. So maybe it wouldn't change that much in that, but like still, I would like people's opinions on it, because I don't want to be, like I said, the white straight dude that is just fucking spewing off about whatever, because I do think that we do lack in this conversation. While our feelings are attached to it, my career is attached to it. The girls I coach are attached to it. I do feel like I lack perspective to some degree, and that's me being honest about it.
I guess the only way to really get that perspective is to have someone speak on it, and there's so few out there that it'd be really hard to find someone to speak on it, other than the person whose record was broken. I mean, they obviously had some strong feelings about it. So it's kind of like, well, can you?
I do think it's kind of funny in that situation that they talked to the trans woman about how she felt about her records being broken, but they neglected to talk to the 2 or 3 people sitting behind her on the podium about their feelings about it. I do feel like that's somewhat telling.
Yeah, that's true.
That dude did it to be an asshole and to prove a point. We can all agree on that. Like, whether you support what he did or not, like, you may even think it's comical that he did. And even a dark side of me thinks it's pretty fucking funny, to be completely honest with you. I don't think it was the right thing to do, but, can be a little bit of a nihilist sometimes, so it is what it is. I think there's a lot of different perspectives we get. We need a woman's perspective. I do feel like we need the perspective of somebody in the community, LGBTQ plus community, and I do think I don't really believe that we need a political opinion on this whatsoever. I think it's pretty cut and dry. They're people; they deserve rights, and I don't think there's no argument about where they stand in the world. Like, they're as human as anybody. So
the only opinion we want is the fairness in the sport and what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I would honestly, I would hang on every word he said. I would love to hear Lane Norton talk about this.
That would be
because he knows the chemical side of the human body to a level that almost no one else does.
Yeah.
And I would like the opinion, if it was possible, I'd like the opinion of trans people and potentially trans athletes on it. Like a genuine opinion. Like, maybe that's something that we can get for you guys. I don't know. It's hard in Coleman, Alabama, in a rural community where, quite frankly, there's not a lot of this taking place. But to get an opinion on that, I would like the opinion of minority men and women, to be honest with you, not that don't fall under the transgender category, whatever it may be. Like, how do you feel about it? I don't know. Like, y'all should think about it, because I don't think nothing. First of all, no opinion that me and Nathan shared. I would say that I'm not really concrete about anything. I think I could be swayed in several different directions, and I'm open to have a fair discussion about. I'm not going to be yelled at by anybody, but I'd be open to have a fair and intelligent conversation with anybody about it.
Yeah. And we can all, maybe I'll make a reel and we'll post it on Instagram and just be like, hey, comment and tell us what you think. What does all this, what is your opinion on all this?
Yeah.
Like, how do you...
Well, I would like to know, and I do want good, when you do this, I do want good thought out answers from anybody from any end of the spectrum. I don't want it to just be a political rant about how we suck because we're men and we lift weights. Like, that's not a real argument. That's no straw man shit. I want some real, some real opinions and
intelligent, thought out. Just not. Women should be in the sport and not transgender. We don't want that.
Fuck yeah! I mean, you got a Trump 2024 hat on. Obviously, you feel that way. Like, give me a reason why. Tell me why.
What's the opinion? What's the reasoning behind it?
We want a genuine answer, and that doesn't matter whatever corner you happen to stand in. We want an explanation on it.
Yeah, and telling us what you are would make sense too. Like, be like, hey,
I'm a white cisgendered male, straight, Like, let's talk about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and then if you're transgendered or bisexual, gay, whatever, and your opinion on this is, I think they should have this because this.
yeah,
That's what we'd like to see. Intelligent conversation. That's what we like to
absolutely.
see.
It's due. Because we haven't had much intelligent conversation on this particular topic. Doesn't exist.
And on the opposite end of that spectrum,
It's time for dad jokes.
It's time for dad jokes. I've seen so many good ones from Dad Says Jokes recently, and like, oh my God, I hope I can find at least one of them.
I got a joke I'm going to share because it's actually, if I can find it, it's actually on topic.
What did the left butt cheek say to the right butt cheek?
What?
If we stick together, we can put a stop to all this shit.
It took you a lot longer than I thought it did. Yeah, absolutely did. I think I may have found this.
Was it about the Easter Bunny?
What do you call a transgendered vegan? A herbivore.
Damn.
That's mine. That's the only one I got today.
That's all of our intelligent conversation prior.
It's fleeting.
Everyone just turned off the podcast. They're like, I'm never listening to this again. In the spirit of Easter, why did the Easter Bunny go to the barber?
Why?
He had a bad hair day.
Great.
Well, I think we had a pretty good discussion today.
We did, yeah. It's dangerous. I swear to God, we're not bigots. We would like to be educated on it, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
If you have any insight about exogenous hormones, for performance enhancing reasons or for transitioning reasons, we would like to hear them. We're open and honest, and that's the only thing this podcast was. If it's some things that bothered you, just know that, like I said, our opinions on it are probably movable. So, yeah, don't be afraid to share what your insight is and have an intelligent conversation with us, because that's what we feel like we need. So,
yeah. And if we get enough intelligent comments and actually have a conversation with people, we may revisit it and talk about it again.
Yeah, it was probably worth it, because it is the future of the sport that we're talking about, and it is pressing. So
we don't want the sport to undergo any more torment than it already has
in any direction.
Yeah, with the USPA, and there's too many things that have gone negatively with the sport. We don't want to see more negative impact on the sport because we love it.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all. Good night.